Growing up with a dad that's a doctor is great in a lot of ways. You have a professional at the ready when your little brother sticks a hot pepper up his nose, or when you need someone to know the difference between an ibuprofen and superglue type of wound and a real emergency. It is weird, though, when you start to realize that you and your brother aren't your dad's only patients. There are countless others out there in the world, and they are constantly stopping you to say hi and deliver the same message. Tell Dr. J hi and how much he means to our family. Years later, I've come to grips with the idea that my dad has had many, many, many patients that aren't just me and my brother. The small child's pangs of jealousy have been replaced with an immense pride. When I was presented with the opportunity to tell the story of one of those patients and her lifelong relationship with my dad, I jumped right in. Leigh Mathis Smith was born several weeks premature on April 20th, 1983, and weighed 3 pounds 3 ounces. Her parents, Mike and Betsy, were given the horrifying news that Leigh had a less than 10% chance of survival. Now, more than 3 decades later, Leigh is living a full, healthy life and has a family of her own. From Colorado to Kansas City, back to Colorado, and now California, Leigh has credited several doctors, nurses, and countless others with her ability to not only make it out of the hospital and beat the odds, but to thrive. However, there has been one doc to stand out among the rest: Leigh's pediatrician and my dad, Dr. J. This is the story of how Dr. J helped to save Leigh's life and how she changed his.
All right.
Okay.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's kind of long awaited. So I'm Leigh Smith. I am the patient.
My name is Betsy Mathis, and I am Leigh Smith's mother.
And I am Mike Mathis, and I am Leigh Smith's father.
Well, my name is Jay Markson. In my practice of pediatrics, people know me as Dr. J. Most of my patients don't know that I have a last name.
How would you describe your relationship with Dr. J?
I would say one of trust, I think. And I think we both just kind of implicitly trust one another. And one that has just transcended time. Like, here I am, 38 years old now, and I still go to him for advice, not even medical advice.
So one of the things I wanted to ask right off the bat was, what were kind of the seeds of this project? What kind of inspired you to want to tell the story in the first place?
Yeah, I think it kind of started through the COVID pandemic. Obviously, living with a chronic lung condition, like during this past year, has been scary. And so I was able to go back to Colorado in January and get the COVID vaccine at National Jewish, which was the hospital that I've been affiliated with essentially since I was born.
Our good old pal, Dr. J, came over, and Jay and Leigh and I had lunch together and out on our back patio, and just reminisced on the last 35, 36, 7 years, and realized then, although we all kind of knew it, that we have this full circle, very special relationship that I can't imagine many other people have with their pediatrician. And I even hate to say it's my pediatrician. It's like when you say your neighbor is your friend, but you call him your neighbor instead of your friend. It's like you don't even want to say my pediatrician. It's like my friend, my dear friend, our dear friend Jay.
Kind of, I guess, serendipitous. So I was sitting here on April 18th. My 38th birthday is on Tuesday, on April 20th.
Hey, happy upcoming birthday.
Thank you. So I was born April 20th, born at 31 weeks. Spent, 3 to 4 months in the hospital prior to coming home. Spent the first 3 to 4 years on oxygen, and have spent now my whole life on a litany of medicines, inhalers, nebulizers, etc. But I think typically I've been very private about this chronic illness. I think because I never really felt different, or that I had something that was so severe, I guess, that it was holding me back. Both my parents and Dr. J really kind of helped me believe that I could do anything.
I was only 25, which, is so young for today's time, with Leigh, and everything was going swimmingly until probably, I delivered her at 31 weeks. So probably about a month prior to that, one day I just, I knew something was wrong. And so I raced over to the doctor's office, and sure enough, there I was, with my water breaking at 31 weeks. I think I had her about 10 o'clock Wednesday night. And much to our, I don't know what, naivete, or we missed the signs, I don't know. We thought everything was fine.
Once Betsy had delivered and Leigh was in, the neonatal care, there was a nurse there that had said, she's doing okay. And you may want to get some rest. You may want to go home and get some rest. And so as new parents, you don't know what okay means. It's I almost deemed it like all is well. So anyway, I headed home, did get a phone call, and that was a jolting phone call. It was, you need to get back here. First of all, your wife is struggling with her own health issue. And secondarily, your daughter Leigh has been transported by ambulance to Children's Hospital. And so you go from this early birth and worry, anxiety, you get a certain signal that things may be okay, and then there's a whipsaw effect. But that was when I think I recognized, wow, we've got some serious problems, and Leigh's in trouble.
They came into my room probably around, I don't know, 1 or 2, something like that. And they brought Leigh in an incubator. I mean, we couldn't hold her or anything, and just said, we want you to be able to see your daughter before she heads over to Children's by ambulance. And they said, the neonatologist there said, it's a little bit touch and go right now. You need to know the odds, and it's not good. She's got about 10 to 20% chance of living.
Wow.
And it was just went from, you just couldn't believe that was happening. I was just at work then, the day before, and several key things that can go wrong for a preemie. And Mike and I were quickly trying to digest that. When you're on a lot of oxygen, that can damage your eyes. If you're on a lot of oxygen on a ventilator and it has to pump air into your air sacs rigorously, which it did in Leigh's case, it can damage although it saves your life, it can damage your lungs, which is bronchopulmonary dysplasia. It took us a year to spell it, to be able to repeat it, and kind of get a sense of what it meant.
The development of a lung is not normal, so that you get some thickening in parts of the lungs. The lungs, as they develop and grow, parts of the lung get more aerated than other parts. So some of the bronchial tubes are narrowed, some of the areas of the lung are over distended. So the lung, and then even the blood vessels to the lungs may not grow correctly because the bronchial tubes and the pulmonary arteries go right together. So if there's distortion with the lungs, then all that gets affected.
So it's called bronchopulmonary dysplasia. So I tell people it kind of acts like asthma, except it's constant. So I tell them, take your lung function, like on a good day, you probably feel like you can breathe pretty well, and cut that in half. And that's my baseline. My pulmonologist now really just calls it chronic lung disease, or couches it under the title COPD, which many people actually get from smoking, but it acts the same way.
We slowly assimilated this, day after day. It seemed to be, as we're trying to educate ourselves and come to terms with all of that, things seem to be piling up. But it wasn't unique to Leigh necessarily. It's probably more common to what happens to, babies that are born so prematurely.
How long was Leigh in and out of the hospital then in those first few months?
Well, she was at Children's for a month, and then she got transferred back to Swedish for 2 more months. So she was in the hospital for 3 months. They kind of set up a makeshift area for me to take care of Leigh for a couple days on my own. They were just, yelling distance away if I needed it. But, I gave her all of her medicines and, adjusted the oxygen tank and set up the apnea monitor and all that kind of stuff, which was so smart on their part, because otherwise, I don't know what we would have done.
What was it like trying to figure out how to take care of this baby?
There's a million stories to that. It's a wonderful question. I think, first of all, the joy of just having our daughter home. The recognition that, as Betsy said, there was oxygen tanks, there were apnea monitors, there were closets full of medications that were going to be part of the process. And again, we'd disengage from the hospital at that point. So all of a sudden the ownership of this is ours now. I would just say it was scary. And I will mention, a specific instance, because, Leigh could stop breathing. It could be a breath holder or just, medical, the condition that she was in. And so before we had left, they had actually taught us how to do CPR on an infant. And there was a night where we had to do that. I had to do that. And at that point, we bundled her up and we took her back to the hospital, and we said we're not equipped. Her life is in our hands, and we are not physically and medically equipped to do this.
Betsy, you had written about these 2 idioms that you had gotten from your dad. I was wondering, one, if you'd like to share them, and if you could talk about what they have meant for you, kind of persevering through those really scary first couple of years.
I don't know if a lot of people my age had parents like that, but my dad was, you made your bed, so you lie in it and that kind of thing. But his 2 biggest ones were, life isn't a bowl of cherries, Bets, and I never promised you a rose garden. And my sister and I heard it, all the time. So by the time we were adults, we got it. Life isn't a bowl of cherries, and nobody promised us a rose garden. It has served me well, even though I just rolled my eyeballs every time he said it. I recognized that I was not going to be special and be exempt from, trauma or hardship in life.
Bets, I'd add to that. A part of Leigh spending so much time in the NICU, and it is, not intimately, but we got to see a lot of other families and a lot of other, infants that, were born prematurely. And we knew that many of them were in for a much rougher battle than our daughter was. So I think it's a perspective
True.
that we help gain there. That yes, while Leigh's got some significant challenges, other families and their children may be dealing with much worse.
Right. There's always somebody worse off.
Right.
I cannot even fathom being like 25 and 26 years old and going to the hospital every day for 3 months because you didn't get to bring your baby home. I mean, my mom didn't get to hold me when I was born. And I think to be able to like raise somebody that I feel like I'm relatively healthy, normal, accomplished, have a family. They were pretty remarkable too. I mean, I don't know how they did it, but.
So Children's Medical Center was recommended to us by a doctor that was the attending doctor at the ICU at Children's. And he recommended that we go see a doctor at Children's Medical Center. And he actually recommended one of the older physicians there who turned out to not be taking new patients, but that they recommended we see the new young doctor that had just been in practice for, I don't know, was it a year or 6 months or something?
Wasn't long.
And we said, sure, if you guys think he's great, let's do it. So we set up a time to go down to the office and meet him.
I have a reverence for physicians anyway, but I walked in and I thought, here is this doctor. He looks like a giant of a man that could have played small forward for the Denver Nuggets.
And what was his name?
Mike?
His name was Dr. J. Markson.
How did you get into pediatrics?
Well, one, I couldn't be a professional basketball player, was one. My father had a very successful furniture and carpet business, and I think somewhere along the line in the 70s and 80s, that was kind of my father's idea that I do that, but I was rebellious enough to never want to be in the furniture business. And I had a great relationship with my own pediatrician, and I did have kind of a scientific bent. So, and I love working with kids. So when I got into medical school, which took me 3 times, but I persevered, it seemed like once I got into medical school, the kind of doctor I was going to be was to be a pediatrician. The role of the pediatrician is really a general doctor for just young children. And what's different about pediatrics, your direct patient is the child, but by extension, the parents. So you're really taking care of the whole family.
Can you describe to me what you remember about your first meetings with little baby Leigh and her parents?
In looking back on some of the charts, she was actually about 18 months old when I first met her, and Leigh had already been through her incredible newborn course with her diagnosis of bronchopulmonary dysplasia, sepsis, newborn pneumonias, then discharge, and on full-time oxygen at discharge of oxygen and multiple medications, and then rehospitalization. Interestingly, originally, when they were looking for a pediatrician, I had an older partner who was kind of the pediatrician's pediatrician in Denver, Colorado. His name, may he rest in peace, Dr. Jules Amer, who was my mentor. And they were told, well, you have to go see Dr. Amer. So when Mike and Betsy Mathis called to see Dr. Amer, they were told, oh, so sorry, Dr. Amer would love to see you, but he's too busy and he's scheduled up. We do have this new young pediatrician, smart, delightful, Jay Markson. Would you like to see him? And I think they initially hemmed and hawed, and I think they didn't commit right away, but they did some research on their own. So I guess that was enough for them to give me a shot. There was plenty of room in my schedule to see a new patient.
I instantly and intuitively liked him. You just get a sense for someone in the first couple minutes, and this was a genuine person He had humor, and finding humor at a moment in time like this is a hard thing, but sometimes it's really meaningful, and it was for us. So I became comfortable with Dr. J in about 3 minutes.
We walked into the room, and he was sitting up on the exam table and had one of those goofy shirts on and this big mop of brown hair and big glasses. And he was so relaxed and funny. And part of me was like, this hasn't been very funny for us, but I realized that's exactly what we needed.
They came in all smiles and with this beautiful child with oxygen tubes, and I take one look at Leigh. She's breathing fast, almost blue lips, but smiling and engaging. And then I was not reassured further when I actually got to the point of listening to her lungs. They were all crackly and junky, and it still didn't allay my fears that maybe she really needs to be back in the hospital. What's she doing in my office? They keep telling me what they do at home, and she's doing so much better now than she was when she's in the hospital. And when she turns a little more blue, we just turn up the oxygen. And you have to remember, these were the days before easy oxygen monitoring called pulse oximetry. This predated all that. So she was once labeled as the most severe bronchopulmonary dysplasia child to leave Children's Hospital in one piece. One of the things I learned early on is to listen to parents and their level of capabilities. And I think that's what got me through the first encounter. Yes, I looked. Yes, I listened to Leigh, the child, but probably the most important thing I got out of that, even though I was incredibly fearful, I listened to the parents. And then when they left, I thought to myself, I don't think they're going to come back, because, what can I do for them?
We needed somebody to kind of take the edge off and help us kind of get through this stuff with humor, because that ultimately is how you get through tough times. At least we found that. So Mike said he kind of fell in love with him in 3 minutes, and I'd say 4 for me. 4 minutes for me.
Why do you think it took you an extra minute?
Because I think I was kind of absorbing this whole smock thing that he was wearing.
I think part of parents developing trust in somebody is if the parents know that you're going through something similar, that you've demonstrated your own love for your own child. And interestingly, Harris, this is about the time that you yourself were born, in October of 1985, when all this was going on, when I was first getting to know Leigh, who was about 18 months old at the time. So there you go. Wow. So they must have known also that I was going through young fatherhood.
What is your understanding of what your first few years of life were like?
My understanding is they tried to make it as normal as possible. Grandparents would come over and babysit. Sure. I went to daycare. I was able to, wade in a baby pool. We went to Disney when I was like 5, 6 years old. But we always had a huge oxygen tank or two. And I just had a long cord that would just follow me around. The cannula was here, always taped like this. My parents tell me stories that I would there was so much cord that I would wrap myself around things, and then all of a sudden I would go, caught! And they'd have to pick me up and come unwrap me. Right. But I think they tried to keep it as normal as possible.
my mom had a tank, and my dad and his wife had a tank, and Mike's folks had a tank. And so we could go to their house, and, she'd have 30 feet of foot tubes or tubing. And yeah, so it was an isolating time. It's kind of where your doctor's office and your doctor are your pals, because they know what you're going through and you see them the most. And I think, we probably went in there once a week for years. And that's how, one of the ways that we got so close with Dr. J. He became one of our very best friends.
Well, real quick, a little diversion. Betsy, I wonder, because you ended up working at CMC, when did you join the CMC team, and what was that experience like?
It was wonderful. It was my favorite job I ever had. And Dr. J just kind of thought that, I had this on-the-job training of taking care of Leigh, and it was kind of, come work with us. And so I did. And I was there almost 25 years. I loved I don't know if I would say I loved every second of it, but I loved being a part of that great group, having my friend Jay there. It was just one of those extra added gifts that came from our relationship with Dr. J.
Leigh was adjusting as well. So even though she didn't necessarily spend a lot of time with, young kids her age, because she couldn't ski and couldn't swim, and we couldn't take her to higher altitudes, so there were limitations there. She was raised by adults. She really was. And what Betsy had said about never promised you a rose garden, I think somehow Leigh either had it hardwired into who she was, but she would, if she could have said it at the time, she probably would have said, "This isn't a rose garden, so I'm dealing with it." And
As I got older, I think number one, medicines just improve. And so as I got older, my pulmonologist and Dr. J were able to figure out kind of a different cocktail of medicines as new medicines became available. And so I wasn't in need of the oxygen and the daily nebulizers that sometimes were constricting to what I was able to do.
Did you ever start consciously developing like a philosophy or a mantra in terms of not kind of focusing on the negative and focusing on the positive? How did you not develop like a woe is me, like why is this happening to me?
I think probably one, I just never knew any different. Two, my parents just didn't let me think that way. I mean, my mom was not raised that way. My dad was not raised that way. They would turn things that may be frustrating, like I would have to go get a chest x-ray or a pulmonary function test, usually a couple times a year. Back then it was kind of in the basement of National Jewish. And rather than getting frustrated, my mom would always kind of laugh about how I was the youngest person by like 70 years. And so she tried to kind of turn this stuff into funny things, as opposed to focusing on kind of the actual like illness itself.
Mike and Betsy Mathis are both naturally positive, optimistic people, and I think of anything they helped to give to their child, it was that.
How did you both strike that balance while wanting to give Leigh as full a life as possible, while also making sure she was safe and healthy?
We didn't want this fragile flower, girl. We'd go to the kiddie pool, and I'd just hold the oxygen tank, and she'd, walk around in it with her tubing. And we both had great growing up, and a lot of opportunity that came our way. And we wanted that for her. And so that was also, I think, where the Dr. J partnership came in so well, because we would maybe bounce off him.
And incrementally, as Leigh, would take an interest in something. Maybe it was dance. I think I tried to drag her out to the golf course and to expose her to that. To maybe those activities that weren't, so strenuous that she felt she could do. We would pursue those in anything she was interested in,
Yeah.
but always with, the guidance and conversation of our dear friend and Dr. J.
Well, and I think, like, for example, I played high school tennis. I could be huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing, but I think as a high school kid, I didn't want to stand out. So
Right.
I fought through it,
Yeah.
right? You just kind of kept going.
Do you remember what your reaction was when Leigh told you she wanted to play high school tennis?
Well, I thought initially she was joking.
What was your reaction when Leigh told you she wanted to play tennis in high school?
Leigh was actually quite athletic. She's very coordinated, had great eye-hand coordination, and so I think that my initial thought was, okay, if we could give this a go.
She wasn't kidding. She says, Dr. J, I want to play tennis. So again, I didn't put any kibosh on her desires to play tennis, and I actually tried my best not to react by saying, I don't think you can play tennis, and you need oxygen still frequently, and you are on all these medicines, and you sometimes still have to go to the hospital, and upper respiratory things can do you in, and she had a component of asthma, and you take all these asthma medicines. I didn't say any of that.
My parents always said that I had to do a sport in high school. It didn't matter what it was, but I had to do something to participate. And so I just kind of took a liking to it.
And you correct me if I'm wrong, but you were pretty good.
I was okay.
Don't be modest.
Yeah, I played, JV my freshman year, and I didn't like that. I wanted to be on the varsity team. My parents told me I needed to work harder.
Right.
So I worked harder and played varsity my last 3 years. And my senior year, actually, my partner and I won regionals and played in the state.
That's
So,
amazing.
With everything that you'd been through, what was it like watching Leigh not only play tennis, but thrive on the court?
So for me, so heartwarming, so enriching, because to see her to accomplish something that we would have never anticipated, and we knew it mattered to her, and there was such joy and camaraderie on that team, and to achieve a state level, that was a real highlight.
In high school, you got to get involved with stuff, or you can kind of get lost in the shuffle. And to be a part of a team, we were just pinching ourselves that she was able to experience something like that.
She is so dynamic, so energetic. You can probably still hear the crackle in her chest during the interview that you do with her. So her disease process is still there, but it has not dimmed her life expectations and what she wants from it.
A hard moment for any parent. What was it like sending Leigh off to college?
Thrilling for me, heartbreaking for Betsy.
I just had the hardest time. We were very close. Kelly, her younger sister, we all went up. She went to CSU, and we all drove up and got her moved in, and Mike headed back, and Kelly and I kind of helped her get a room set up and that kind of thing. And then we left, and she cried like a baby, and so did I. And Kelly, she's in 6th grade, and she's like, Mom, it's gonna be okay. She's patting me on the shoulder and on the knee. I'm driving home like from Fort Collins, just like I'm in a torrential rainstorm. Get home, and I kept the door to her room shut for like 2 weeks because I couldn't bear to look in there. And so not only did I just miss her so much too, it was also, is she going to remember to do all this stuff that she needs to do every day?
it was a little, it was exciting. It was a little scary. realizing that I was going to kind of have to be in charge of everything. Like if I didn't feel well, making a doctor's appointment, getting my medicines. I made the mistake the first time filling my medicines that I was out. I realized I was out that morning. I'd done the last, puff on my inhaler, call the pharmacy for a refill, and it's going to be 3 days before they can get it in. You live and you learn, and didn't breathe very well for a few days, and then I was fine, but I've been used to my mom and dad taking care of that for me. So I was fortunate, and then college, I had a pretty good run of health. I didn't have a lot of flare-ups or hospitalizations, things like that. I'm not sure kind of why that was, but it is hard kind of having to maintain something like that every day.
Of course. I mean, usually it's, at least for me, it was the cold slap of reality was that I had to do my own laundry.
Yes.
a little bit different.
Early on in her life, and I'm not sure where this came about, she had this affinity towards setting up a dollhouse and teaching some of her stuffed animals. So she was a teacher at age 3, and I think knew early on that she was going to teach, that she wanted to, and that is exactly what she did.
I have always wanted to be a teacher. I'm not sure specifically why, but growing up, in our basements, like my parents would always let me have a school room, and I would like teach my sister and her friends and stuff like that. So it's something that I've just
What would you
always...
teach them? Do you remember?
I don't even remember. My dad would take me to the teacher store though and get me books and things like that. I would
That's
fill out stuff
incredible.
and then grade them, and
Were you a harsh teacher? Were you strict?
Yes, I was.
Amazing.
It was my chance to keep her in her place.
Exactly.
The lungs develop late in gestation, and then when you're born early, they don't have the normal mechanism, the surfactant and everything, the lubricating material in the lungs to develop normally. Then the lungs develop abnormally outside of the utero.
Actually, you made a very good point. I'd have to look back, but I think Leigh was born right before the surfactant era, or at least the good surfactant era. So Harris, surfactant is one of these things that's administered right at the time of birth that helps protect lung development, growth, and airways that might have prevented a lot of problems. And I think it'll be important to emphasize she kind of had the double hit with prematurity, lack of proper surfactant, and these neonatal pneumonias. She had a big time neonatal pneumonia that probably helped ruin her lungs for life. She had kind of perfect storm of bad factors.
As an adult, I think I've struggled a little more. You mentioned earlier kind of growing up, how did you not kind of think, woe is me?
Yeah.
I think I've struggled with that a little bit more into adulthood.
Sure.
Just kind of certain things, like sometimes just getting tired of taking medicine every day, or when I have a flare-up, I always have to go on steroids, and for those people that have had to go on steroids for a variety of reasons, they make you feel crazy. They make your face puff up, they make you gain weight. And as a female, you don't like that. And so I think I've struggled with little things like that that seem probably silly to some people, like, oh, it's just medicine. But, when you feel kind of out of control or not in control of your body, like that's not a good feeling. But knowing that that's the thing that's going to make you better, right? That you don't really have a choice. You have to take that. We got married, 987, so September 8th, 2007.
I do the math for my
There'd be any father talking about his daughter getting married. So all of those same emotions, joy, and if anything's going to tug your heart and pull your raw emotions out. It is that. Again, it's just another monumental step in life. Because again, when you think back to when she was young, you don't know what the future looks like. So
it was a night in September, and it was at this very interesting venue that had a big open patio. And after, when they stand up and thank everybody for coming, at the very end of her speech, she said that there's one person here that has helped me get here more than anybody else. And if it wasn't kind of for his love and care, I wouldn't be here.
Obviously, having Dr. J there was a no-brainer, as he probably had just finished being my pediatrician at the time that I got married. I gave it, toast, thanking everybody for coming, family, etc. And I wasn't even really planning on saying anything about Dr. J, but I just kind of felt like something kind of came over me, and I felt like it needed to be said. And I just kind of acknowledged him and said, for those of you who don't know, this person, Dr. J. Markson has been very influential in my life, and has taken care of me for a long, long time, and really has kind of saved my life.
I remember it was this grand speech that Leigh made, first thanking her husband, Greg Smith, a wonderful guy. And of course, she extolled the virtues of her parents and of course her sister Kelly. And then she said something like, well, one person I just have to thank is Dr. J. And my mind is actually blank after that.
So you could kind of hear this, because I think there was 3 tables or so from Children's Medical Center. And then she's crying, and of course I'm crying. And as we later found out, Jay and Martha were crying, and it was so perfect. And she just thanked him in front of 150 of our closest people in the world for loving her and taking such good care of her, and just this public display of appreciation. And it was one for the record books.
In retrospect, I mean, I knew I was very important in her life, but to hear me pointed out more than a bunch of other people, probably more deserving, the fact that it was so foundational and fundamental that I became in her life, I really had not realized until that point, and I was just sobbing.
As I mentioned with the teaching, I kind of got sick a lot just because of the germs, and so my second year teaching, I had a week-long stay in the hospital with a really bad case of pneumonia.
Wow.
And so when I got out, I was obviously followed closely by my pulmonologist, Dr. Fenton, and he and I had just a very personal conversation about, do you think that I can have biological children?
You asked me specifically, what do you think about me getting pregnant? And I struggled with that a lot, but I felt that it was the right piece of advice, but that's a big life decision.
Yeah, well, to confirm, because there's probably not a lot of, there's basis in terms of what happens to your lungs when you're pregnant, but I think, probably where we both struggled was there wasn't a lot of research on this, right? It was just kind of going off of, what you thought. And when I met my pulmonologist out here, one of the first questions he asked me is, he said, do you have biological kids? And I said, no. And he said, never do.
Yeah, well, okay.
So you got confirmed by another pulmonologist.
What specifically about a pregnancy would be so dangerous for Leigh?
Obviously, the pregnancy will cause a significant reduction in lung capacity, and her lung capacity is already about 50%. So then, if you reduce it any further, she would probably have needed oxygen. It may have put the baby at risk. And I was just worried about her getting an infection in the middle of this and then being in the hospital. And it just, I think just a combination of things, Harris. And asthma's worse in pregnancy. Well, I should say that for some patients, a third to maybe a half of patients with asthma can have a worsening during pregnancy. So that's the other, she has a flare up and then has to go on steroids or other medications. And then we put the baby at risk. And then personally, I was worried about her, something that would happen to her if she didn't make it, even if the baby did, and I don't know, those types of things go through your mind.
Yeah.
It just kind of became like it wasn't worth it. Like, when there's so many other ways to have a family. We pursued adoption, and we waited about 2 years for Ben.
Oh, wow.
And then Ben was born on February 6th, 2013. And yeah, that was the best day.
Oh, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one of those moments that it would be almost understandable for you to start looking at this as this isn't fair. Why is this happening to me? But to turn it into something as beautiful. Now you have a son. Like, what do you think allows you to do that?
I struggled earlier with
Sure.
it. And I think sometimes that's being in your 20s.
Yeah.
Like you're not as confident in yourself. And I struggled with things like friends that would have baby showers.
Yeah.
And because I didn't, I didn't get to do some of those things. I didn't get to experience what it was like being pregnant.
Right.
But once Ben was born, I think just none of that really mattered. And then I think with age, you just become more confident kind of in who you are as a person. Yeah. And you start to realize that some of the stuff that seemed important at the time is not so important. We took him to Children's Medical Center.
How has your relationship with Dr. J changed now that you're a parent?
I think my appreciation for him is so much greater, I think, because clearly he provided my parents with this calming presence.
Right.
And that was with a child that was extremely compromised, right?
Sure.
I would get worried about, Ben was a terrible sleeper. And so I think I brought him in at like 2 weeks and I was just a wreck. I was like, I haven't slept. I'm exhausted. I didn't feel good. I mean, it's hard even raising a kid with compromised health, right? Because you're not getting, the sleep and stuff that you need. And he said, where does he sleep best? I said, the car seat. Put him in the car seat. Like, why can't he sleep there? He's not going to sleep there when he's 9 months old.
Right.
Sure enough, slept through the night. Like 2 days later, in the car seat. So if he was that reassuring to me about something that really is, at the time, feels significant because you're sleep deprived, but really is not that significant, then he was probably magic, to my parents. COVID has been very, very scary.
Yeah.
Probably one of the scariest times in my life.
It's just one of those things you don't want to mess with. If you're lucky, you just get a cold, symptoms, and you're out for a little while. And a bad flu probably would be a better way to put it. But if someone like Leigh got it, then she's going to be much more apt to get a secondary infection associated with it.
He basically operates on 40 to 50% lung capacity as an adult. So the easy answer to your question, what might COVID do to somebody like Leigh? Well, if she really got COVID, it would be likely cause her to lose her life.
I think it's made me aware to kind of the world we live in, and that we all need to be a little more like doctors and be a little more selfless, right? Like, wear a mask, do that for the common good, get vaccinated, do that for the common good. Because you don't know how many people like me are out there walking around.
Right.
That was the best day getting vaccinated.
Oh,
I
yeah.
cried like a baby. It was so awesome.
Why did you want to tell this story?
Well, I think, it was at a time when everybody was getting so COVID weary. It felt like doctors were on trial, kind of. And I think that we realized that people needed to hear a completely 180 kind of story.
Again, I go back to those first few days and first few months of Leigh's life, and from the neonatologist and neonatal nurses that cared for her, and then to Jay and the staff at Children's, and ultimately the physicians and staff at National Jewish, and all that have worked with and supported Leigh. My experience through it all is these are selfless professionals that just do it for the goodness of helping others. It's one thing to put your trust in someone and have that trust broken, but we're all human beings. We're all fallible or whatever. There's also something to put your trust in someone and find comfort and peace.
I feel like it is important for people to recognize the medical profession, how wonderful doctors and nurses are, how caring and selfless they are, and how if you just put a little trust or a little faith in them, you can form an amazing bond and relationship, and it can become one of the most important relationships in your life.
Well, a good pediatrician is a lot of things. I think it all comes down to the listener, navigator sort of person. You have to know about a person's life, their family's life, what their job is, what they need. These days there's a term thrown for it, social determinants. Food insecurity, is their house safe, is their neighborhood safe? One has to inject themselves in a family's life to really help be able to take care of a patient the best.
And finally, for both of you, what have you learned from Leigh?
Many things. Beth, you want to go first?
You start.
I'll pick one. There are many things, but and I've used the word before. It's just resilience. That even when you're dealt a challenge, and sometimes a significant one, not only can you overcome it, but you can overcome it in a manner that actually shines light and brings light and life to other people. So she's impacted so many individuals that she's encountered through her life. It'd be countless. And that despite her challenges, the power of just a positive spirit.
I would add that, again, too many things to mention, but she has lived her life with grace and no attention on herself. And I think people that know her well, even family and friends that have known her for a long time, will be surprised to hear some of the things that they may learn about her, because she just never drew attention to herself. She just, she never said, I can't breathe. I mean, she did to us, but she never did to anybody else. And she just handled every challenge that has come her way and continues to. She's the toughest person I know.
Let's see. For my parents, I think I have learned, I'll quote my grandfather, that nobody promised you a rose garden. and that despite these challenges, you know, everybody is dealt something in their life, and it's how you handle them, you know, whether you choose to handle them, you know, with grace or get angry, that's going to kind of determine what your life is going to be like and your outlook on life. And you know, my mom has Parkinson's. She's been dealt, you know, a tough hand, and rather than get frustrated and angry, she has embraced the Parkinson's community and is now one of their biggest advocates.
Leigh has taught me the world. She taught me how to become a better doctor. Well, not just Leigh, her whole family. Leigh has taught me how a pediatrician can still be a resource to people, even when they're no longer your patient officially.
Dr. J can correct this, but I think I was one of his first patients. I think the fact that my parents put trust in kind of a young doctor, you know, early on, probably solidified that foundation of trust, and kind of trust like we've talked about in the patient-doctor relationship. I don't know if it's like fate or just, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I would have to imagine that a lot of people with chronic conditions do have good relationships with their doctors, right? You have to, because you're there a lot. But there's something in this relationship with Dr. J that he kind of became a third parent.
Yeah.
He really did. He just, and kind of the voice, you know, either in my head or my mom's head when, you know, we needed help with something or something wasn't going right medically, you could kind of hear him saying something.
Looking back on when you started your life in pediatrics, did you envision having this type of impact on someone's life, or someone having this type of impact on your life?
Never. I don't think it was part of my wavelength at that time. I remember I had a hard enough time getting into medical school the third time, but with experiences like this, it sure has been worth it. I mean, to become so involved and so critically in some people's life where one is giving back a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, what in life is better than that? Are we on right now?
Yeah, we're on.
How does it feel to be out in California?
Feels great to be here with you in such a wonderful project.
Very cool.
What was it about this guy that you liked?
He was funny. He always gave like big Dr. J hugs. He just was a calming presence.
Yeah, it's so nice to hear about myself.
Dr. J, do you remember meeting Leigh?
Well, I certainly remember the circumstances. My picture of you is over time. I probably don't remember exactly the first initial episode other than Leigh Mathis, the concept.
That's exactly how he would greet me every time I came into the doctor's office. Hello, Leigh Mathis.
Well, that's your name.
I know.
Leigh, do you have a Dr. J impression?
That I do. The one that sticks out in my mind actually is, I think my sister was at the doctor because she stuck a rock up her nose or something.
Yeah.
And I brought Dr. J some Reese's Pieces, and he goes, "Thanks for the easy pieces, Leigh."
It's really great.
I remember moving to Kansas City and being more devastated about leaving you than like any of my friends. I think that's when I first realized, like, I really like this person. Mm-hmm.
We have in our possession here a letter that Dr. J left behind for Leigh.
I think I found it probably going through photos and things during college or after college, and I laminated it, and it actually hung in my cubicle at Littleton High School when I taught there for 12 years. Because I just thought it was such a great reminder of the importance of having like an adult figure and an important kind of person in your life. And so the date is May 5th, 1993. So I just turned 10 years old.
Leigh, I'm gonna have you read the letter.
Okay. I will do my best.
Well,
I think I can do it.
We have it typed out here.
For those of you that don't know, Dr. J has a very unique handwriting
We can
style.
call it doctor handwriting.
Doctor handwriting.
That's pretty good. Here's the corrected version, just in
Okay.
case.
Okay.
So Leigh's gonna read it to you.
Yeah. So May 5th, 1993. So dear Leigh, as you are about to move to Kansas City, writing this note causes me both a special joy and sadness. Leigh, you are my most wonderful example of a student teaching the teacher. From that beautifully designed face, whether sick or well, emanates a glow, a love of life. Leigh, you have that amazing ability to take things in stride. I know that as you grow older with your illness, you will increasingly question the reason for taking all of the medications, and perhaps even changes in lifestyle forced by your illness. Leigh, you should question these things and challenge them to your utmost, but I know you will do it in your own very special way, with that glow, a love and respect for life. Leigh, your parents and Kelly love you. Good luck in Kansas City. Thanks for teaching me. Love, Dr. J.
Wow.
I wonder now, as my wife and I embark on our own journey, raising our son Rowan. Will Rowan have a pediatrician who not only cares for and about him, but who will be interested and open to learning from him? Should he ever encounter a critical health issue along the way, will he know the peace and courage that only a selfless and invested physician can provide? Will he have the gift of a relationship with his doctor, which endures time and becomes something more lasting and meaningful that impacts the trajectory of his life and his doctor's? I can only hope so, and I wish the same for you.
Hi everyone, this is Leigh again, and I want to personally thank you for viewing our story. I hope you found a nugget or two of hope and faith in the physician-patient relationship. For those of you who would like to know more about and to support the good work occurring at Children's Hospital Colorado and within the American Academy of Pediatrics, you can donate directly from our website. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my other doctors who have supported and helped me in the same manner as Dr. J. Their selfless commitment knows no bounds. I want to personally thank Dr. Dave Hall, Dr. Leland Fan, Dr. Susan Brugman, Dr. James Fenton, and Dr. Daryl Banta. Thank you all for watching, and my very best to you.